Welcome back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. Happy New Year, everyone. I appreciate my listeners hanging in there while I took a hiatus from the podcast. I received many messages asking where I've been and that you miss tuning in every week to hear me talk true crime, which is just so sweet. Just a quick update for everyone. I started a new job and I'm back to working 5 days a week. I used to have a 4-day work week and a whole day to dedicate to Killer Stories. I've just been getting in the hang of my new position and finally found the time to jump back in. I will still be uploading to YouTube, but it will be audio with still pictures. For now, anyways. It's just too time-consuming to get the video edited. I'm a one-woman show, you know? This week, I have a case that will seriously make you question every little sound you hear in your house. I live in an old house. Lots of random noises. Usually it doesn't bother me unless I stay up watching paranormal shows. Then I basically don't sleep. But after hearing this story, I investigate every noise. Let's get a little background on Brittany and James. They dated a while right after high school, but went their separate ways. They ended up rekindling their relationship in their mid-30s. Brittany describes herself as bubbly and outgoing, while James is a bit more reserved and analytical. She says they evened each other out and were a perfect match. James had 2 children from a previous relationship. Brittany did not have any children of her own, yet was anxious to become a stepmother. The couple eloped in Las Vegas in 2018. Elvis stood in front of a pink Cadillac and pronounced them Mr. and Mrs. Campbell. James was in the Navy, and after just a year of marriage, he was given orders to serve at a base in Honolulu, Hawaii. So James, Brittany, their 2 boys, and a cat, Mr. Franklin, made the move to the island of Oahu. The house that they moved into was not what they expected in Hawaii, a bit cookie cutter, much like what they were used to in the suburbs of mainland United States. The familiarity made them feel pretty comfortable in their new home. Once settled in, they adopted a little chihuahua to keep Mr. Franklin company. The Campbells still had plenty of boxes stacked in the garage to unpack. We've been in our house now almost 5 years, and I'm pretty sure we still have a few unopened boxes. I think it's safe to say whatever is in there, we don't need it. One day, maybe just 2 weeks in their new home, Brittany walked into their attached garage. What she saw startled her. Boxes were moved out of place and opened. Items were removed and put into piles. She asked James if he started unpacking things. He said no, he hadn't touched the boxes. Her first thought was then maybe the garage had been broken into, but it didn't seem like a robbery as there were multiple expensive items, like James's musical equipment, that wasn't taken. She assumed maybe their 2 boys were in there messing around. The boys swore it wasn't them. James knew his boys, and he didn't fully believe them. He was sure that's what happened and just wrote it off. About a week later, Brittany was home alone when she heard the front door slam. Now, she always shuts and locks the door. You and me both, Brittany. She had a flashback of the garage being rummaged through and was officially shook up. She slowly walked out of her bedroom and peeked outside. She begins yelling out for her family, but there's no response. She ran down the stairs and looked through the peephole. No one seemed to be outside the door, so she opened it and looked around. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a normal view of her cul-de-sac. Brittany went back inside, shut, and locked the door. She began checking every room and closet inside the house. She was alone. But what in the world caused the front door to slam? That evening, she told James about what happened. He provided her with possible explanations, like it was left ajar and a draft slammed it shut. No, she knows for a fact that door was shut and locked. But what do? You can't prove what happened at this point, so they just go on with their day-to-day life. One night, Brittany is stirred awake by a noise. I'm sure her subconscious is now on full alert. It sounded as if a door downstairs opened and closed. She sat up and listened carefully. She heard it again. A door from downstairs opened and then closed. Brittany leaned over and woke James, telling him what she heard. James had given some sort of explanation for every mysterious thing that has happened so far. He kind of thought Brittany was just being paranoid, so he was honestly a bit grouchy from being shaken awake. James said he 100% locked the doors before bed and she was just hearing things. Brittany decided to be the brave one and ventured downstairs. She didn't see anyone down there, no doors ajar or anything out of place. However, the front door was unlocked. She thinks to herself maybe her kids got out of bed and came down for a glass of water, something like that, but she goes back upstairs and peeks into their room. Both boys were fast asleep. Brittany is beginning to feel like she is crazy hearing all these noises in the house, but after checking the whole place out, she goes back to bed. Brittany tells James that the front door was unlocked and it wasn't the boys. They were arguing about the unlocked door when they hear the back door, which is a sliding glass door, open and shut. This time, James goes down to investigate. He comes back upstairs and admits the door was unlocked, but no one's there and it's locked now, so they can just try and get some sleep. F that. I would be packed up and staying at a hotel for sure. But more unexplainable activity continues to happen. One night, Brittany woke up to see their webcam light was on. Neither Brittany or James touched it, and the boys didn't even know what a webcam was. Another day, James was downstairs playing the piano in the living room. He noticed something out of the corner of his eye and turned towards the window. He saw the shadow of someone standing right outside the window, watching or listening to him. He got freaked out and just got up and left his piano bench without investigating. Honestly, up until this point, I would be thinking this was paranormal activity. Opening and closing doors, that is something people have reported happening. But James clearly saw a person standing outside of the living room window. He is beginning to realize that Brittany is right. Something weird is happening in their house. James kept an event desk calendar, and he sat down to review the upcoming week and noticed that someone had written on it. It said, "Your rehabilitation starts today. Do as I did. Choose a house, clean it, set up all devices." James is confused. He didn't write that, but he thinks maybe Brittany did as a weird way of asking him to clean the house. So he begins sweeping and straightening up. What a nice husband. About 3 weeks later, the family decided to see a movie at the theater. Brittany wanted to take her blanket that they all cuddle under when watching TV at home. She thought it would be fun to use it at the theater, too. But the blanket was nowhere to be found. It is always right there in the living room. They checked all the bedrooms, the laundry pile, no blanket. So they leave for the theater without it. When they return, the blanket is folded up neatly on the couch. Whatever it is that is happening in this house, I would want no part of it. And the Campbells agree. It's time for them to get away for a bit. They plan a week-long vacation visiting family on the mainland. The Campbells fly back to Honolulu September 20th, 2019. Brittany and James are hoping that whatever or whoever was messing with them has moved on and things can get back to normal. But as they pull into their cul-de-sac, they see James's bicycle laying in the driveway. A big WTF moment. They most definitely did not leave that there when they left a week ago. Someone has been in their garage. James hits the garage door opener and sees that it has been completely trashed. Boxes were ripped open and items strewn about. You couldn't even see the floor. His first thought was that they had been a victim of robbery. James instructs his family to stay put in the car while he jumps out and grabs a sledgehammer from the garage. As Brittany calls 911, James slowly approaches the front door. He uses his key to unlock it, but something is blocking it from opening all the way. He continues to try and push the door open when he sees a man looking back at him through the crack. He says, "This is not your house." James had a surge of adrenaline. This was his house. He was determined to get in there. He plowed through the door and grabbed the man by his shirt, throwing him outside. James notices the man is wearing his clothing. Brittany is worried about the well-being of their cat, Mr. Franklin, and runs inside to check on him. This man had poor Mr. Franklin in a small cage without any water. She could see that the man attempted to feed him, but not normal cat food. He fed him dried apricots. James stood over this man with a sledgehammer until the police arrived. The man, 23-year-old Ezequiel Zayas, didn't resist arrest. He was taken to the station to be interviewed. They assumed he was a homeless man that took advantage of an empty house while they were away. What a homecoming, right? But phew, it's over. The cops have him now. Well, actually, it's far from over. The Campbells were in for quite a surprise. Once the commotion died down, they went back inside the home where this intruder had been living in their absence. The place was such a disaster, it was hard to make sense of what they were seeing. But as James's eyes were able to focus, he noticed that there were tinctures and test tube vials, like what they use to draw your blood, lying all around the house. Amongst the junk and the test tubes, James's musical instruments were strewn across the floor. In the kitchen, all the pots and pans were stacked on the counter. James walked upstairs and into his boys' room. Unlike the rest of the house, their room actually seemed cleaner than how they left it. As if this man put their toys away, folded their laundry, and made the bed. James was dumbfounded. This was not making any sense. He walked across the hall and opened the door to their master bedroom. Their room was not clean. It looked like a teenage boy resided there, a complete disaster. But the extremely disturbing part was that on their bed was a towel laid out, and on that towel was a variety of knives in a neat line. I'm picturing like when Dexter unfolds his knife kill kit. Next to the knives sat a laptop, which James recognized as his. It wasn't one he currently used. It was old, but apparently still worked. At this point, Brittany had joined him in the master bedroom. In complete shock, they touched the mouse pad to wake up the laptop. There was a Word document opened on the screen. It was titled, "The Omnivore Trials, a Rehabilitation for Rat-like People." This is like a real-life horror film. Let's dissect this title. Omnivore means an animal or person that consumes both plants and meat. Rat-like people? Who are these rat-like people? Do they live in sewers and have beady eyes and whiskers? Rehabilitation? In what way? Let's find out. As they start reading this document, they realize it's more like a journal. The entries were describing these specimens and their daily activities. The Campbells were the specimens. Ezequiel had been spying on them for a long time. There was information in there from private conversations James and Brittany had together in their bedroom. While they were parents to James's boys from a previous relationship, Brittany wanted to have more children and was struggling to get pregnant. This was not something she talked about with anyone else, yet here it was written in this document. It stated that the, quote, creature needed to stop trying to have a baby and focus on the children she already had, unquote. He referred to Brittany as a creature. The document went on to say that he needed to perform surgeries on these specimens to rehabilitate them. The author wrote that they would need to amputate their hands and undergo gender reassignment. Suddenly, the test tube vials and set of knives on the bed started making sense. This person who had been spying on them for months was planning to play doctor on this family. There was a list of drugs that would be needed to sedate them and surgical instruments to perform the surgeries. A little shopping list of sorts. In the search history, they found that he had been looking for surgical tables and searching for instructions on how to perform surgeries at home. After this discovery, Brittany decided to take a closer look at her computer. She had a vanity table in her room where she often followed along with makeup tutorials on her laptop. She started looking through her documents and noted that Ezequiel had taken a video using her laptop. He was sitting on her chair at the vanity, naked, doing his own makeup tutorial. He explained he was going to show how to transform yourself cosmetically. Brittany believes this was his way of mocking her. He took an eyeliner pencil and drew a line from the top of his forehead down the middle to his neck. Then he shaved one half of his face, leaving a scruffy beard and mustache on the other side. Then he picks up Brittany's brushes and begins to do his makeup on one half of his face. The Campbells were very close to becoming victims of, I don't even know what you'd call it, torture, a science experiment, and potentially murder. Their instincts were spot on, feeling that they needed to leave that house because Ezequiel had every intention of carrying out his plan. Not long after the family moved into this house, Ezequiel found a way in. He had been living in the crawl space above their second-floor bathroom. When the time was right, he would sneak out of the crawl space and observe the Campbells, then write about it in his Omnivore Trials manifesto. He was responsible for the boxes in the garage, all the doors opening and shutting in the house, as well as the mysterious missing blanket. If you find this terrifying, you are about to have your mind blown. This is common enough that it has an actual term. It's called phrogging. Not frog like the amphibian, frog like P-H-R-O-G. Phrogging is the act of secretly living in another person's home without their knowledge or permission. And there's an entire series on Lifetime called Phrogging, Hider in My House. The Campbell's case is featured in Season 1, Episode 1, Bump in the Night, which is my main source of information for today's episode. Other families have people living in their attic, basement, crawl space, and ceilings. Yeah, this happens. I can now add phrogging to my legitimate list of fears. I'm setting up cameras in every freaking room. Wondering what happened to Ezequiel Zayas? Well, he was arrested for felony burglary, but ended up being released just days later. Yeah, James was angry and terrified because he felt like his family was in danger. But not long after he was let go, he was arrested for vandalizing a Buddhist temple. He was sent back to jail to await trial. I know what else you are thinking. This is called killer stories. But no one in this story was killed. Luckily, the Campbell family survived this event, but Ezequiel's cellmate, however, did not. Vance Grace was at the tail end of his 34-year prison sentence in Hawaii. After his release, he planned to fly to the mainland where he would attend his son's retirement ceremony as a U.S. Marine. But unfortunately, he never made it out of that prison. It was summer of 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic was in full swing. Vance tested positive and was placed into a solitary confinement with 2 other prisoners, one being Ezequiel Zayas. Knowing that Vance Grace was so close to getting out, I doubt he provoked Ezequiel in any way. But Ezequiel began beating 62-year-old Vance, punching, kicking, and stomping on his head. The correctional guard saw the fight and ran to their cell to intervene. But the key was stuck and he had trouble getting the door opened, apparently a known issue with the locks in this prison. He witnessed Ezequiel brutally beat Vance, who later died from his injuries. Ezequiel was charged with murder in the 1st degree. A psychologist deemed him unfit to proceed, and he is currently in a hospital awaiting trial. So if you are questioning if he could really have gone through with his plans of cutting up the Campbell family, there's your answer. But just because they physically survived the event doesn't mean they are okay. Imagine the nightmares they have. The whole family is psychologically scarred for life. They may never get over the fact that they were being spied on by a stranger living in their home for months. They immediately moved out of that house in Honolulu. Brittany stated that it has been extremely difficult to recover from and completely uprooted their lives. She is on a constant alert and doesn't feel like she ever truly has privacy. Vance Grace's son, Nelson Coburn, sued the state of Hawaii and the Department of Public Safety. The lawsuit alleges state officials, quote, knowingly placed Mr. Grace in jeopardy of serious injury and death and failed to follow basic common sense correctional practices that would have prevented Mr. Grace's brutal murder at the hands of a violent cellmate. Not only that, but if the locks of the prison cells are known to be faulty, that should most definitely be addressed. I recommend watching the Lifetime series on Phrogging. Once you start, you can't stop. The stories are truly unbelievable. Thank you so much for tuning in to Killer Stories. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Killer Stories Podcast, and I'm on Twitter at Killer Story Pod. If you would like to support the show, you can leave a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/killerstories. But the best way to help is share the podcast with your true crime-loving friends. Now, excuse me while I go board up my crawl space. Until next time, this has been a killer story.